Okay, you asked for it. If you want to listen to me again. So, TGN 1412. I won't go through all this again. I've done that first slide. You don't need me to go over that. Right, this particular image here shows interaction between antigen-presenting cell and a T cell. I've used this before in the earlier talks. Antigen-presenting cell, here is the antigen. T cell receptor, this is a representation of CD3. Here is the CD4 attached here. And this interaction between CD28 and B7. And the sort of take-home message from this particular figure is that you need these two signals to give rise to the production of interleukin-2 and the components of the interleukin-2 gene receptor, which is referred to previously as CD25. It's the alpha subunit. So under normal circumstances, these cells only contain 2 of the 3 components of the interleukin-2 receptor. But when the cell gets activated in this particular way, it begins to produce interleukin-2, which can be generated, which works in an autocrine fashion, and it also stimulates the production of CD25, which then will form complex here and make the cell much more sensitive to interleukin-2. And if you look back through your notes, I did show sort of pharmacological representation of the sensitivity of the cell based upon the different subunits, and that the attachment of the alpha subunit caused about a 30-fold shift to the left, which makes the cell much more sensitive to interleukin-2. If the cell now responds to interleukin-2 much better than it did before, this particular cell, which recognises this part of the epitope of the antigen that's presented, more of that will be produced. It will proliferate. And that's what I talked about in some of the earlier lectures. This is a paper, and I indicated right at the outset, I'm not an immunologist, but my sort of interest in this area, I do a little bit of work on the immune system, but not that much. But I did become interested, this is about 12 years ago, I did become interested in CD28. And before the whole Northland Park event took place, I was aware of this particular paper. And the title of it, I was quite taken with at the time. It says, Topological Requirements of Signaling Properties of T-cell activated anti-CD28 antibody superagonists. That's a bit of a mouthful. So, agonist means something that activates the receptor. Superagonist means something that really activates the receptor. But this is an antibody to CD28 that they're reporting. Well, prior to me reading this paper, actually a year before reading this paper, I did speak to a colleague who's a proper immunologist. He told me that actually, under certain circumstances, you can have antibodies that activate the cells. But that was news to me. But the interest in this paper was actually, here was something that was being identified that's an antibody directed against CD28, but it's not blocking the CD28, it's actually activating CD28. And I thought that was quite interesting. So this is probably about 2004 I came across this particular paper. So here, and I said to you, a colleague told me, yes, under certain circumstances, you can get antibodies that activate receptors, or activate T cells. he told me about, well, there's some examples of anti-CD3 antibodies that can give rise to this signal. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then this paper seemed to be saying, actually, you don't need the B7 binding to CD28. Actually, if you put this anti-CD28 with just the T cell, you can get the same signal. And for the time, that was really novel. It's an interesting idea. And what the authors showed was that they could show that this molecule in a cell proliferation assay caused proliferation of T cells. So the interest here is that normally you need two signals to cause the proliferation of T cells, but the inference here was actually the anti-CD28, just this here, can cause the cells to produce CD25 and interleukin 2, and that will promote proliferation. So,
are they similar to like superantigens?
Well, I said the paper said super agonists.
Yeah. But do they work in a similar manner as given like overstimulation and like causing cytokines?
I think that's the way in which you could view it. But I think from my point of view, as a pharmacologist, they use the word agonist, right? An agonist for me says G protein coupled receptors, so noradrenaline, acetylcholine, things like that, morphine. Right, G protein coupled receptors. This is saying you've got a proteinaceous molecule, an antibody, that can bind with something on the surface of the cell and elicit a response, a very specific response. And so, I think if the title said superantigen, I wouldn't have taken any interest, but they use the word agonist, and that elicits, no pun intended, but that elicits a response in me because of the sort of interest. And this is some of the data that I've shown. So I'm talking you through now some of the things that were known before the incident at Northwick Park. And what they show here, so this is a combination of what they used. These are a whole set of different antibodies that they have here. And they're using cell proliferation assay. And here, where they've used the TCR, is the anti-T cell receptor antibody, so it's like the anti-CD3 that I just showed, in combination with another antibody here, which is directed against CD28. And when it's used in combination, all these little notations here are different forms of monoclonal antibodies directed against CD28. And they can see that in combination, all those antibodies actually elicit a response. But the really interesting one is when they list off this. And this is what they're reporting. So you take that out and you redo the assay, and actually what they find here, this one, on its own, stimulates the proliferation of T cells. You don't need the second signal. And this one also. The others, this one, 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 they need the second signal. Right? They don't need the antigen presenting cell. You just need the antibodies and the T cell, but the two antibodies together clearly is enough to cause proliferation of the T cells. But the really interesting one was that here there are anti-CD28 antibodies, and they will have slightly different epitopes associated with them. On their own, they're capable of stimulating proliferation of T cells. So to me, that was really novel. So this has been going through some of the data here that they've got. See if I can remember what we've got here. Key thing. And I think the key one here just shows the fact that you've got, looking at the relationship between the amount of antibody to anti-CD28 and the response. And of the two antibodies that looked at before, here were two that on their own, at very low concentrations, were able to cause the proliferation of T cells. Okay? So there's no recognition of the T cell receptor. They will just stimulate proliferation of T cells. That was novel. So that was the observation. I thought that was very interesting. And then sometime later, I did notice this particular paper came out. Oh no, actually slightly before. This one shows, and this is the guy here, Thomas Herdig. They also reported prior to that CD28 superagonists, again they use that term, could cause a rapid recovery from T lymphopenia. So where there is low levels of lymphocytes, so it could be, the way they were thinking here is after chemotherapy, if you try to treat somebody who's got a lymphoma, and you give chemotherapeutic agents to get rid of all those T cells, you want the individual, you don't want them to succumb to infections. You want a way to get their T cell levels back to normal. And so their thinking is that actually this CD28 superagonist can cause the proliferation of T cells and make somebody who is susceptible to infection less susceptible. That's the thinking here with this paper. And they presented data that was, I don't need to go through this in detail, but this is data that shows that you can drive T cell expansion in rats that have had the thymus removed by using this CD28 superagonist. They don't specify, well they do specify the particular antibody, one of those that they previously used. But what is clear is that you don't need the thymus to drive the proliferation of T cells within these particular animals. So you can see that the sort of horrible phrase, but the markets for this, for any patient who is undergoing cancer chemotherapy, where there will be a reduction in T cells, you want to prevent them being susceptible to infection. They're saying that maybe this is a route by which you can rapidly help the person repopulate with T cells and reduce their likelihood of infection. Yes, but this is all in experimental animals. And then it gets, this was confusing to me, I have to say. Right, so two papers I've shown you, 2004 and 2003, and then I came across this paper. And here it says superagonists, anti-CD28 antibodies, are potent activators of regulatory T cells for therapy of autoimmune conditions. And the 2003 paper said, let's stimulate the immune system and repopulate somebody who's been depleted of T cells. This one is saying, okay, we've got an antibody that is also a superagonist, but it is selective for population of T cells that normally inhibit the immune system. And I have put up on Moodle, there's a set of notes about regulatory T cells. I haven't talked about them in detail, but they are a key part of this particular talk. So here they're saying that potent activators of regulatory T cells, and they're now advocating that actually in certain conditions where maybe there's an overactivation of the immune system, so rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune condition, if you can selectively upregulate regulatory T cells, you reduce some of the symptoms associated with that autoimmune condition. Well, at this point, having read the paper, I have to say I was confused. So, and it's all by the same group, Thomas Hurley colleagues. On the one hand, they will say we've got antibodies that can cause T cell expansion and help the body fight infection, but actually we've got some other antibodies that act on the same target, but specifically on certain types of T cells that will suppress the immune system. And I was only reading it at the time out of interest, but to me there seemed to be some sort of conflicting messages about what they were doing. But both papers, all three papers have been published. But the key thing here is that they, in this particular paper, they identified a set of T cells, these regulatory T cells. These are cells that are CD4 positive, and they also have constitutively expressed on their surface CD25, the alpha subunit of the interleukin-2 receptor. Now, I said to you right at the beginning, go back to the opening slide. Yeah, here. So that CD25 molecule that's on the surface, they're not normally there on T cells. They have to be induced when the cells are stimulated. But regulatory T cells possess CD25 constitutively. A very small population of cells, but they have CD25, which basically means they are more sensitive to interleukin-2 than most of the T cells in the body. They will respond to very low levels of T cells because they already have all three interleukin-2 receptor subunits, the alpha, beta, and gamma. And this paper is saying we've got a particular antibody that can bind CD28 and bind selectively to CD28 on T regulatory cells and stimulate those cells. And if we've got that, then maybe in autoimmune conditions, we could increase the population of regulatory T cells, turn off the immune system, and better manage some of the symptoms associated with autoimmune conditions. That's what they're arguing here. And at the time, I just thought, okay, now I'm sort of lost in this. But what they were advocating on here, and this is in the paper, is actually there may be several different sites at which monoclonal antibodies can interact with CD28. So this is CD28 here, a representation of it, and they were saying that there are some of the agents, these superagonists, that potentially bind at this point, which would be equivalent of here, and by dint of the FAB portion of that sort of the antibody binding to adjacent CD28, that could lead to activation. That was the model that they were working on. But they were saying that they had antibodies that could selectively or preferentially upregulate T regulatory T cells, or T cell receptors on regulatory T cells. And the significance of that regulatory T cells, that small population of T cells, is that they will promote the secretion of not interleukin-2, but they'll promote the secretion of transforming growth factor beta and also interleukin 10. And interleukin 10 is sort of classically a sort of anti-inflammatory cytokine. It turns off many of the activated systems. So here, these cells which express CD25, they're more likely and they're therefore more sensitive to interleukin 2. They will be the first ones that will respond to the anti-CD28 agonist. That's what's shown right here. This one, also by Thomas Hernig, so this is in 2005, and also talked about here. This is almost the opposite. So I remember reading this at the time and thinking these investigators want it both ways. They want to, on the one hand, say these compounds are useful in the context of autoimmune conditions, but they also want where you want polyclonal T-cell expansion. And as I said before, actually I was confused by it, right? At this point. And I didn't take any notice of this, but I was aware of the paper. So that sort of sets the scene of the background to TGF-1412. Then the next bit was a set of reviews. This was 2006, I think it was. It took place in the summer. No, it was around this time, around March 2006. It took place. And if you go through with Google on this, you'll see this picture. This woman was featured on the news. She was pictured or filmed ringing a friend saying he looks like an elephant, a partner. He looks like an elephant. And this was a partner. The partner has recovered to a degree at some point later. This is Thomas Hernig. The added reason for being interested, I've said Thomas Hernig a number of times. I did a postdoc many years ago in the city of Würzburg, in Germany. Thomas Hernig is from Würzburg. He works at the Max Planck Institute in Würzburg. So that was an added reason to take notice of all this. So these are the headlines, or these are some of the pictures that came across. So March 13th, 2000, it's this week, 12 years ago. Clinical trial. FIM stands for First in Man Study. They had 8 healthy male volunteers who were randomised. It was a randomised placebo-controlled trial. What that meant in terms of the way in which the experiment was set up is that there were 2 individuals who received placebo and 6 individuals who received the dose of the particular drug. It was double-blinded, so neither the volunteers nor the investigators that were involved knew which drug, who was receiving what. And it was part of, and often first-in-man studies are like this, is what they call a dose escalation study. I'll give a dose, I'll step back. And this has all been agreed ethically, and it's worth bearing this in mind. It's first-in-man study. I haven't put it on here, but you'll see it in the folders there. All of the data in primates with the compound that was going into man showed absolutely no change in the immune system. Okay? So it had been evaluated in rats, the particular antibody, it had been evaluated in primates, and everything except this drug doesn't change much. So that's why when it went to the ethical review, then they said, well, I looked at the data, it does what the investigators say it could do, we can give you permission to take this as a first-in-man study. So this was done at Northwick Park in 2006. And the dose escalation study probably involved giving a dose, and they would give something like, I think it's about 100th of the dose that had been used in primates to start off with. And then they would give them permission that if after an hour or 2 hours there were none of these changes, then they would be allowed to increase the dose until they detected some change in terms of the T cells that were being produced and stuff like that. I don't actually, in truth, I can't remember what the key markers were, but it was a dose escalation study. And this is data taken from the New England Journal of Medicine paper that was published, I think, later that summer as a result of this incident. So within that unit, I don't know what dose, I think probably the very first dose was given, and I think a bit of the background to this, and I may come back onto this in a short while, is that Northwick Park had a particular research centre, and they would invite volunteers to take part. But I think on that morning, whoever was supposed to be responsible for administering the drug, they were busy somewhere else. So they got somebody else in to say, will you come and administer these particular drugs? And that individual had to leave after about an hour, and then somebody else was going to come, and if it was deemed appropriate, so they would increase the dose further as part of the dose escalation study. So the individual administered the dose to all 6. And from what I understand, within about 50 minutes or so, then some of the individuals were beginning to feel a little overwhelmed. And on here, they were beginning to feel a little unwell, and then it progressively got worse. So all 6 individuals received their allocated drug, either the placebo or the low dose of the, all 8 individuals, the low dose of the TGN 1412. Here is the dose that's given here. Here's their weight. And let's see what we've got here. Here is some, so the first thing is that they would start feeling they're in pain. Shown there, they've got headaches. What else is there? I forgot what the order in which I put this on. Oh, and the other aspect here. Blood pressure was very low in a number of them. So a major drop in blood pressure associated. So they were beginning to feel in pain. Blood pressure dropped considerably. So next slide. And I think at that point, when patients started, I think they had. Just double check this. Yeah, 6 in study. Right, I think the individuals were feeling so bad after an hour, they called in other experts, and then eventually they had the patients moved from the research centre into the hospital. And that's where a lot of these particular measurements were being made. And you can see on here that the plasma or the blood that was taken after the first day, there is a major increase in TNF alpha, a major increase in interferon gamma in those individuals. A a major increase in C-reactive protein, and an increase in creatinine as well. Now those first three, TNF-alpha, the interferon gamma, and the C-reactive protein, this drug was used first in man on the basis that actually it did nothing in primates. Right? It didn't do anything in primates. But actually, the symptoms that the patients experience, the reduction in blood pressure, and the appearance of this, you'll see next week, these are sort of classic like sepsis, cytokine storm response. Yeah? And that's the opposite of what was thought to be. Right? So that's how the patients were feeling. So all that, and here you can see the C-reactive protein, this is normal levels here. This is sky high in all of those individuals. And you could try and imagine. Have you ever seen the film The Thing? Has anybody seen the film The Thing? Well, watch the film The Thing when you get a chance. There's a scene near the end of the film The Thing in which various individuals are tied down in chairs to be tested. Right? And when they identify who has got the thing in them, the other people who are tied down in the chair start saying, I want to get out of here. And I can only imagine that for the individuals who were placebo controls, who were watching what was happening around them, they would feel just like the individuals of the thing. You have a question? So, no, you have to have it, right? So, watch The Thing if you get a chance. Movie by John Carpenter. It's a very good film. Yeah. So, everything says here, you've got cytokine storm. It's the opposite of what was originally thought to happen. And here are some other data that shows here. So, CD3 T cells went up, CD4, CD8, see increase there. Monocyte numbers, 10 days afterwards, major increase in monocytes, neutrophils also. Again, all of this consistent with the cytokine storm. And for the individuals, and this is all published in the New England Journal of Medicine, this gives a sense of the of what happened. So this is hours after infusion. So this is when the drug went in. Within about an hour, people are complaining of weakness in the limbs, headaches, then a major reduction in blood pressure, fever. This is when the clinicians decide, oh, this looks like a cytokine type storm. Let's give corticosteroids, transient improvement, but this is where there's real problems. Patients 5 and 6 have multiple organ failure. That's what you get in sepsis. You'll hear about that next week. And so you can see, in terms of the timeline here, up to 30 days happens.
Because all of the ligands from the immunoglobulin superfamily, that it binds to a different one than the CD28 to cause this.
You're asking what was the basis of this interaction?
Yeah.
I think the argument is that there are other molecules, or there are other molecules on the surface, particularly granulocytes in man, that are also sensitive to these CD28 molecules. That's right. Yeah. I think there are various explanations that are offered as to how this works. If you look through the literature, so all this happened in 2006, then you'll see a version, and this is where, as scientists, what we do is we tell stories. There's a version of what happens mechanistically that appears 2008. In 2012, another variation of that appears. And that's just all of it is based upon more data being accumulated. And I think the the last one I heard of is that there was a particular interaction with granular sites, an unexpected interaction for that particular molecule there. And it's that that precipitated the cytokine. What is not in question is that we've got 6 patients. This had a really massive effect on their life, and I think one of them has subsequently died many years later, but it died. So that's what happened at Northwood Park. Okay, and the reason for telling you this particular story is one that relates to the immune system. It relates to monoclonal antibodies, and it's about, generally, these molecules are pretty safe. But a key thing about research is that we do have to reflect upon what happens and think how we can improve things. And I think TGN-1412 is, sadly, it's a very good example of what we've learned and how we can change things. The other one that I sometimes use is that, do you remember the event of, I don't know if you remember, Deepwater Horizon? In the Gulf of Mexico, there was a major explosion of an oil rig. And there was a film out 2 years ago starring a couple of stars. But the film is really valuable because what you see are a sequence of events that happened that led to the Deepwater Horizon. And the key thing is, if you look into the literature of it, things have changed. And there are parallels with this. Things have now changed as a result of what happened. And that should give people more confidence about things. Right? So we learn, and we can improve things by learning from failure. That's the key message that I want you to get across today. So much of science, much of what you get in the press is about great new drug. It will cure this, it will cure that. But there are very valuable stories to be learned from the things that don't work, because they guide you in terms of the future. And the government at the time set up an expert committee to look into all of the events of surveillance. And it's called the Duff Report. So this incident happened in March 2006. The expert panels convened pretty quickly afterwards. They took information from lots of people, and then Duff, together with a whole set of other people, wrote the final report. It's well worth reading. I know all these sort of scientific things are a bit dry, but it's worth reading to understand that actually, in some respects, this could have been predicted. Okay? One of the things about it that would have helped is that there was an incident, I think 2003, for the monoclonal antibody, in which it affected one individual, but it was never reported at the time. Okay, it just stayed in-house within a given pharmaceutical company. But after this event, that company or those individuals who were involved said, actually, we were aware of the problem with a similar sort of molecule as these CD24 superagonist. And I think that, for me, what that shows is that your negative results and your problems, in spite of the way in which the publication system is, you should always try and report problems. Because somebody else will read it and it could prompt them to think maybe we need to be careful. That never happened at the time. But the Duff report made 22 recommendations to improve the safety of volunteers in first-in-man studies. And those have been acted upon by, I think, across Europe and across America as well. So these are very important lessons that have been learned from this incident. I mentioned Thomas Hernig. he published, actually I haven't put the date on this, but he did publish something in, I think about 4 years later, to which a number of investigators responded to it. And that's, you'll find both papers, this one and here, in the documents that are put in various folders. You can look at those. But to some degree, you see here, Thomas Hernig was he worked at the university at Würzburg, but he was involved in a company called T. Genero. And that company, what they did, and this happens with lots of companies, is that they have a molecule, but what they do is that they get a secondary organisation to conduct the study. And when they do that, to a degree, they're not completely liable for that, for what happens. There's a shared responsibility associated with that. So if you ask the question, well, what about the volunteers? What compensation would you have? If you look at the events associated with this incident, is that T. Genero went into bankruptcy administration pretty quickly after the event. Their money evaporated. They couldn't cover it. But the company that did the experiment at Northwick Park on behalf of T. Genero, they had limited liability associated with that, which basically meant that for those volunteers, the 6 that were affected by this, any support, or most of the support they got, was actually through the government. Wasn't through those particular companies. But he wrote this about lessons to be learned. And some of the things that he's put down, I think, are reasonable. He indicates that there were certain things we didn't know. And it's just part of any drug development process. You just don't know things. But this response here, these authors actually make the point that actually his commentary is a little bit self-serving. It gets him off the hook because there were certain things that they argue that he should have done, that the questions he should have asked about this. And what this shows is that for any trial that takes place, there are regulatory agencies associated with that, but there's also an ethics committee that's involved. Those ethics committees are made up of professionals, but they're also made up of members of the public. So I'm in charge of the School of Life Sciences Ethics Committee. We deal with relatively straightforward things. There's a medical school ethics committee that would look at applications that involve anything to do with human volunteers, full range of things, nothing is like this, but any sort of investigation of human volunteers. So the reality is that there were lots of different groups of people who said, yeah, this looks okay in the process. And at that point, Thomas Hernig is absolutely right. There was oversight by a whole group of individuals for which collective responsibility is required. I think in light of time, I don't think I'll go through this particular one in much detail. Let's just check where we're going with this. Why don't we have a break? Why don't we have a break? Let's have a 10-minute break now. Yeah? So let's come back in 4 past and then pick up where we are. Yeah? Right, and I'll get this off, see? The rest of our voice for a little while. Alright, so 4:15, we start again.
Again, that's the change to that last page.
There's weird referencing.
I do it
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just found something I think might find interesting. Do you know that the superagonist is been found to be a superantigen as well? So basically, that just means that they bind non-specifically to antibodies to stimulate them.
Tell you what you do next week. You put together. Where's the paper?
Oh, it's actually a textbook.
Is it?
Yeah.
All right. You put together teaching Brown. You can send it to me and I'll look at it. You tell the college what you suspect.
Oh, yeah.
Touch it up?
If I don't
All right.
like,
Yeah, next week.
like the longest way I do something.
There's what you'd like to know.
No, actually, I think all your colleagues would like to know. But if you, next week, you can present that to them. Yeah? Oh, that looks fine.
So you're not going out.
Probably like down to the ones, particularly towards the very end, like
Thanks for that.
and also based on where we see outside the UK, so to potentially say now we have any, for example, infected recently came out of holiday in the UK, that case, yeah, you can't really think it's a positive phenotype to go on, so you can't conclude exactly what
Because the way I looked at it, it's no time left. So
yeah, so CCXT and Oxford Monarchs and then
PDX.
probably should do those. Yeah, I'll see what the next week.
And then we just use the DCMT backtrack and then the freeze gel.
Yeah. How many different controls?
And then also like if you I'll do that.
That's just
So I did somewhere, and then I'm working on the trail myself to have results. And last they did, I had one like tell everyone the and the results of the graph, and literally like how do you do
So the way that we do some of the parameters is the DFI.
That's great. I don't think Cindy, I love Cindy, but it's not yeah, no one else. It's like
No, sometimes.
yeah. It's like it's in the same room as the other.
The vote rather than run PCR should be identified.
I'm sorry about that. You know, it's like my side of the table, it's not like this. It's on the table. So what they were doing
Or like a random JP3. It's like, yeah, I think you
I
told
have
me.
like crafts.
Yeah, because I did it last.
My crafts are getting pretty.
There's no point. It's really
Right, it's like.
I think things.
Yeah,
I think
it's not nice.
but I know I just don't enjoy
Really.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think
I think I have a fight and good at doing it.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm like, Jesus, I'm ready.
because it looks like
Very late.
One of that paper. I didn't read it properly, actually. And what year?
What's the difference in it? It was the way, you know,
like you have different.
There was no for this.
I don't have
This is the letter. Your report. I read through it. Easy directives. He signed the directives. In conclusion.
Of course, that was last week we're going
Well, you can just say that like and you say that it could also be on Saturday.
yeah, I think myself, I'm
What is this?
Oh, no, it's like every
Their whole house has 6 people each. Have you got a baseline? There we go. It's apparently you will give us like it's
Yeah, I'm not
I was mentioning that how it works and it's a basically means it's overstimulates it causing the storm specifically. So and I found that that's expertness is anti-C3 also been shown to be highly protective and activate up to 100%.
Okay, let's pick up. Let's pick up from where I was. Colin has followed on from his query about whether superantigen agonists are the same as superantigens, has found something that he thinks is relevant. What I've suggested is that next week, at the beginning of the session, Colin puts together a few slides. It's great. It's great. It's great on double confidence to say, what about this? So you can educate me the same way you can educate your colleagues. And one of the aspects of I'd like to think in terms of this course is that you come across stuff that I haven't come across, and that we have a discussion about it at a high level as a result of that. That's what it should be. It shouldn't always be the received wisdom and you be passive. So comment, please, next week. Yeah. But if it's helpful to you, there's a few slides. Just I'm happy to look at it before that. But I'm delighted that you've got ideas and can expand. Yeah, just do it. And that's an open thing to anyone. For a discussion. Anything that you've come across that you've read, let's have a discussion with that. Okay, you'll see on the slides, I think what precedes, yeah, that was what was up there before. I talked about the debate about what's the mechanism, what was known, what wasn't known, and that people have different views about. So really, I'm not concerned about the mechanism to any great degree. It's nice to know it, but there are elements of it which clearly there are 6 individuals that received that version of the antibody. They responded in a way that was not predicted at the time. That's the bad thing. The good thing about it is that there are a whole set of recommendations that came out of the DUC report. I would suggest you have a look at those, and if only to give yourself confidence about how things are dealt with now. And you'll see, you'll have heard from Keith Rigg and you'll have heard from Adrian Jones about a whole set of monoclonal antibodies. It should just give you a lot more confidence about how those are evaluated, and any that come in the future. Right? They've all learned from what happened. I have put up a paper. When was this paper published? 2012, so 6 years ago, that offers an explanation. I don't propose to go through it, and on the slides there, I think you should read the paper for yourself and form a view, but just recognise, I've used the term before, that scientists are storytellers. That's what they thought in 2012. It may be slightly different, yeah. Okay? But they offer a mechanistic explanation for some aspects that were seen. Basically, that there was the potential to interact with some forms of FC receptors that appear on neutrophils. That's one of the particular targets. And the tests that were done prior to the study being conducted never considered this as a possibility. But you can look through that. I won't go through that in detail. What I want to go through is this. And as an undergraduate student myself, there's a textbook called Lawrence's Pharmacology. So as an undergraduate student, I remember reading the textbook. How long ago was it? It's 40 odd years ago. And there was this grant. It's called Drug Discovery Timeline, Despair and Hope. And this is Thomas Herling at the outset. I've got an idea. Let's pursue it. Then, some point after that, his results, 2003, 2004, 2005, they look really encouraging. You know, this is going to make a big difference, whether you're dealing with individuals who got an autoimmune condition or whether they have had their T cells obliterated due to cancer chemotherapy. I think we could revolutionise treatment. And then they tested it. So this is post Northwood Park. And the original figure, these are the expressions, these are the terms that we use, I haven't put those on, in which clinicians would go, I would give that to a duck, right? Now that's how people viewed drug discovery 40 odd years ago. It's a cycle that we go through, right? And then somebody says, well, actually with sensible use, with appropriate use, mainly, it will be useful, right? And so it may marginally improve things relative to where you started, but it certainly isn't this, and it's not quite as bad as you really think it was at a particular point in time. Now, if somebody had said to me, TGN1412, is there any chance, if this is what we know about it in 2006 and the sort of post-mortem of the whole incident over the next 5 years, if this is where we are, is there any likelihood that you would get to this particular point? I'd say no chance, right? And I don't think within the USA, I don't think within Europe, anybody would ever think of actually using TGN 1412 again. It's like, you said it, no thank you. Yeah, I've got my reputation at stake. But this is what appeared in 2014. I have to say, I was stunned. We all live to learn stuff. So, here, human regulatory T cells are selectively activated by low dose application of CD28 superagonist TGN1412. It's got here stroke TAB08. It's got another name. And also, but here it's Thomas Herling. It's accepted in a pretty prestigious journal. And it's looking at the administration of TGN1412 in human volunteers, but actually they started their dose escalation study at about 100th of the dose that was used in Northwood Park. I said I don't think any European ethics committee or regulatory agency would have said yes to this. No American one would have said yes to this. But Russia is a different place entirely. Recent events seem to suggest that we seem to confirm what I'm saying. you'll notice that there are a number of Russian scientists associated with this. So where the EU and the United States were the threat, Russia looked at it and said, maybe this is something that could be developed. And they have done dose escalation studies, but at 100th of the dose that was used in the initial study at Northwick Park. And they present information that shows that regulatory T cells are increased in vitro by this. Here they're now using, this is where we have to be careful. So they've said TGA1412, TAB08, but this is a game now, because they'll publish, I haven't checked, but they'll publish 2 other papers, and they'll use TGA1412 and this one, and then some paper after that, they drop this. Right? So nobody will be able to link to Northwood Park. But they've done it, it's there's a trail, but at some point in the future, if this is really going to be a benefit, then this is how it's going to be done. And you won't know it straightforwardly boots into the Northwood Park episode. And here is the data that they were expecting at when they started at Northwood Park. They used low doses in healthy volunteers. Things that they did differently, they had learned from the DOS report, is that they didn't have a situation in which they just gave it to all the volunteers. They said, right, we do it with one, watch over a long period of time, send them away if they're well, and then make a decision after each patient over a long period of time. Do we give it to the second patient? Do we increase the dose? And that's what they've done. So they've taken on board a number of the recommendations from the DOF report. But these are looking at the levels of TNF-alpha with a dose here, micrograms per kilogram, versus, you can see it's about 100th of the dose they started with. There. And they see no change in TNF-alpha, so no change in interferon gamma, actually an increase after 12 days in interleukin 10. And interleukin 10 is the anti-inflammatory cytokine. All this is consistent with the idea that you are selectively activating the regulatory T cells. And that's further evidence there. Shown there. So actually the idea that you could selectively activate regulatory T cells is probably right. This is what the data suggests. But the problem was is that the initial dose that was used at Northwood Park was too high. And that was a dose that was estimated based upon primate model. And humans were slightly different in terms of the way in which granulocytes and other cells will respond. They didn't know that at the time, but that's what it is. So I'll put here, coming to a rheumatoid arthritis patient soon. So my guess is that this drug, for those patients who don't respond to anti-TNF-alpha, don't respond to the other monoclonal antibodies that could potentially be used, this drug may be examined as another option. I need to check, I'll find out this week where we are in this literature. But it nicely illustrates that which I knew years ago about the drug industry, in which you've got to look at what it is, the data that you've got to think about it, and even the worst of drugs, if used appropriately, can be a benefit. A great example is the drug thalidomide. Do you know this drug? Yeah? Yeah, you've heard of thalidomide. But it is used successfully to treat some patients with rheumatoid arthritis. Right? So there's a whole history, and that thalidomide thing had a big impact on the way the drug industry operates. Everybody sort of steps back, and they're very guarded about it, but somebody, like 20, 25 years ago, thought, actually, mechanistically, this drug could be useful in this cohort of patients. Okay? And that's the evidence. It can be used successfully to regulate symptoms associated with inflammation, rheumatoid arthritis. So this is the way in which the drug industry works. Okay? So even the despair course, if you step back and you examine things, you can find something there that potentially will benefits. Okay? The TGN 1412 nicely illustrates that. I think I'm going to stop there. That's it. That's it, really. So I've covered the background to the incident. As far as that's my reading of the literature behind it. There was an interesting story, but some aspects of it, to me, at the time, is sort of conflicting. And I think the investigators need to look at the design to think, why did they publish papers on the basis of the seems to conflict? The Northwood Park incident and the Duff report. Northwood Park illustrates how things were done, and the Duff report has made a number of recommendations which clearly have influenced how things are done now in relation to first-in-man assessment of drugs. Not just monoclonal antibodies, but all the drugs. I haven't really discussed the mechanistic aspects of TGN 1412, but I'm happy to do that if anybody really wants to go forward with that. It's quite complicated, but the point you raised earlier, Colin raised earlier about other cells being involved, that's the way it works. It's not just all reactions to T cells. And the future, well, there should be a question mark there, but it wouldn't surprise me if that drug doesn't appear on the market in some form in the future, if not for rheumatoid arthritis, but maybe for some niche condition.
I just found that it's come back again under a different name.
What different one about it?
The exact same drug but a different name has been trialled again, Tavo-8.
That was the one on there, yeah. Oh, yeah, so what I've just said was right. Yeah. They will drop the TGN 1412 after a period of time, and the Tavo-8 is now the same drug, but it's got a different name. Yeah. What was the trial?
Oh, it was the exact same trial, but a smaller dose, and they got the desired effect. So
in rheumatoid arthritis patients?
I think so, but they just got a reading that it worked on T-reg cells.
Okay, right. I'll have a look at that. Thanks for that. Right? So I hope that was useful. Please look at the information about the assessment that I talked through for both cohorts of students. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to deal with those next week. And for the chronic disease of the immune system, what I'd ask for students now that you've been allocated to particular drugs is meet with your colleagues who are doing the same drug but different areas, and then come to a view as to what you're going to cover. And before we finish next week, I'll just go through a few additional things about the posters that you might consider. Okay? I'll see you next week. But Colin's going to give us some numbers. No.
You go next.
Oh,